The second day of drum tracking was essentially broken down into two parts. We had the Prime Mover and then Who Made the Watchmaker. So the Prime Mover was the first song that we opened up with. And so that's a pretty long song. It's not as long as The World Beyond, but it's pretty close. So when we were tracking that one, we were able to kind of cut it up into these different sections, and the nice thing about the Prime Mover is that it has a lot of dynamic shifts. It has that chorus that repeats a couple of times. But then the second verse is very much different from the first one. The second verse is a bit more dynamic. It starts off kind of nice and quiet with the kind of like a nice simplistic groove, some cross stick, and then sort of builds in dynamic and intensity and kind of follows the guitar solo along. So that part was really cool to do. The solo section was a little tricky to do at first. Just tracking it is a lot of shifting time. It's got a nice drum intro. It's got the one of the best riffs on the album, the Dragon Slayer, which is the last riff of the song, which is just heavy and crushing and just absolutely awesome. And that'll be a fun one to play live eventually, because that last riff is just absolutely killer. And then we move on to Who Made the Watchmaker, which is sort of the magnum opus, the you know, the pinnacle, if you will, of the album. It's a big 5-part epic instrumental masterpiece at the end of the album. It's sort of our, if Respiration is our love letter to This Will Destroy You, then that's sort of our love letter to Transatlantic in terms of its structure and its style.
Now let's just do one big take of the whole 16 minutes of it. Or we could not do that.
So the first part of Who Made the Watchmaker we have is Thought Experiment. So that one starts off, sort of introduces a lot of the themes that are going to be introduced in all the subsequent parts. So that one was a really cool one to do. We have what we've called the In the Presence of Enemies riff, because it's was inspired very much by Dream Theater's In the Presence of Enemies, and it's one of Andrew's favorite drum parts, and it's one of my favorite parts to play. It's a really cool kind of articulate part, and it's got a lot of cool hi-hat accents and fills, and it was really, really cool to do. So that's a good one because it's sort of set down and established a good base for what the rest of the tracks were going to be like, because we warmed up with a lot of those themes. So we move into the second part, which is the Watchmaker's Paradox, and this is a really fun one to do because it kind of starts off with this fun little chorusy bit, and then there's this really this cool drum pattern in the verse where a lot of the instruments cut and you get to hear a lot of the toms going on, which is really nice because I love the way that the toms sounded on this record, the way that they come through. They're, my Sonar drums, I love them. They're very musical, but of course very powerful as well, so that's always really fun to play and hear how that goes. This section brings a couple of challenges as well. Towards the end of this piece, there's a riff that's in 21 or 23. I can't remember. It's one of the two. That was interesting to do because it starts with like a heavy rendition and then slows down with a bit of cross stick. So that was kind of an interesting thing to try out and to get right. But that was a good one to do too. When we get to part 3, we have Testing for God, and this was an interesting one because it's the same drum pattern throughout the entire song, so it was really more of an endurance test, more mentally than physically, because the pattern is not super difficult, but the drums are constructed in a way where they're matching along with the bass, both guitars and keys actually. So like the bass drum is kind of hinting at what the bass guitar is going to be doing. The toms are sort of following the main melodic pattern. The crashes are crashing on the guitar chords. It was a difficult pattern to come up with, but once you kind of got into the swing of it, it was a really interesting, cool piece to do, and just really more focusing on counting and consistent dynamics all the way through, than like a physical strain. Speaking of physical strain, we get to part 4, which is the Null Hypothesis, which has some of the heaviest, craziest parts on the record. Definitely has the most, some of the more metal riffs or metal moments, and some of the crazier, fastest solo parts to play. A lot of themes come back in this part, some of them slightly different, but it really is like the big heavy, like everything's sort of been building up to this point. So there's a lot of good parts, a lot of sections that show those parts in a much more either tighter, faster variation that just comes out with a lot of cool variations and build. To that final ending piece where we just keep adding on instrument after instrument after instrument, which brings us to that final big fill at the end. And I really wanted to slow that down and stretch it out to really make it, to add to that finality of it and to make it feel like, we had just gone through this big, 16, 17, 18 minute long journey, to really make it feel like, again, really make it feel like that transatlantic kind of vibe. Yeah, then that was it. Then we were done. So we double checked some stuff, and then it was just a matter of doing teardown and just having a quick chat with Dave and just talking a bit about next steps and drums and stuff. And it was a really excellent experience. I loved working with Dave. I loved the setup at Helm Studios, and everything we were able to do over those couple of days was really awesome. With it being my first experience in a professional studio like that. It was just very comforting to have someone that was willing to work with us and bring us through the process, and making sure that we were, that I was okay, and that helping to steer us kind of in the right direction, and to help know like when to do a part again and when to let it go, and it was good for the song, and it was we didn't need to micromanage everything, so it was just a really great experience. And immediately after leaving, I already started making notes in my mind about for the next album, things I wanted to improve on with my drumming and things I wanted to, things we had captured on tape and things I wanted to improve on for next time. So it already sort of spurred my imagination and creativity on what the next album's going to bring. So I'm really looking forward to trying that out and getting back into the studio and for album 2 and improving on some of those areas. But it was a bit of a nerve-wracking experience going in because I knew we only had 2 days to sort of lay it down and get it recorded, and this was going to be the foundation. The rest of the album was going to be brought on. There wasn't really much opportunity of going back and changing it. We decided we were going to record bass guitar and keys all together separately, but the drums was this was the thing that was going to kickstart the rest of the album, so we needed to make sure we were happy with them, and we only had a couple of days to do it. So I'm incredibly happy with how they turned out, and I'm proud of how the drums sounded, the performances that were captured. I'm very proud of how it turned out, and I'm really looking forward to album 2 and going at it again.
That was it.
So we did drums, and that was sort of a first for both Justin and I. We went in with Dave, and it was our first time meeting Dave, who over the course of the year and a half that we did our album, or this album, we got to know him really well. But this was our first time in the studio with Dave, and I knew Justin was really, really nervous, and I was kind of nervous for him, because, we'd never been to the studio, and so, yeah, I mean, you can see the entire time in all the videos, I'm like standing at the window, creeping into the room because, I wanted to give him moral support and tell him how he was doing, and it was a really good experience. I think actually, as much as fun as it was to record the drums and actually have the first time we ever, professionally recorded something, I would actually say that the best part of the whole experience was getting to know Dave and actually just like hanging out in the studio and really solidifying the music that we'd worked at that point on for 3 years on. So that was excellent. It was, Dave had certain ways that he did things, but he really got to know us and he really tailored the experience to what we wanted, and we got to know him. And so, yeah, I think the highlight was actually just spending a weekend recording music for me, with 2 other really, really cool people. One that I already know, and the other one who I got to know and actually, became fairly close with over the course of the year of recording. So it was excellent. Good job, Jess.
Woohoo!